Oh crap, my mic is quiet. Hi Mega, welcome to the stream. Quiet. Hi Mega, welcome to the stream. Echo. Oh crap, I hate when that happens. Here's me. Hi guys, it's me. Welcome to the stream. My name is Rainbow Peppa. Apparently tomorrow is my affiliate anniversary, and it counts today and tomorrow, so, I'm doing a little thing, that, might be a stupid idea. But, hold on. Is it bad still? Test, guys. Test. Okay, is it good now? Because it was just replaying. Okay, we're good? Yes, tomorrow is my, affiliate anniversary, guys. Technically, I don't know how. I just kind of caught up last week, found out when I was watching Cash Boom's stream anniversary. So today, we're gonna, part one of this anniversary, or technically both parts of you, and I explain as we go, is me replaying all the OG CNR games and the prototypes. There's a couple catches and twists to this that I wanted to mention it. Is that there's some meme-esque alerts on right now you can turn on. They're cheap. The idea is they're really dirt cheap and they're going to give me hell and back. But if you have any channel points, you can use them and probably scare the shit out of me. Like that. Like that. They're random. It's like the hamster. If you guys have randomly shuffles around 4 different videos. Yeah. I didn't see that one. But yeah, let me know if there's any audio issues. I'm pretty sure it will work. You know, everything should work as intended. No, I'm glad you tuned in, Mega. I know you were here last night when I was playing Mario Kart and probably was sleep deprived. Yeah, but that's just me every day. True. I gotta do that. But yeah, today's plan is to play CNR 1 and maybe 2. This isn't a... this stream won't be as long as the second part. The second part has more than just so the deal is, my main part is CNR 1 and 2. There's originally going to be a plan later tonight with a collab. But that guy had some real life things he had to reschedule with. So that will be next Sunday probably, is the plan for that. So, he's a great guy, but yeah, he had some real life things come up and, that's fine, right? But yes, let's get started, shall we? Let me update. I'm Deadman, welcome to the stream. Yeah, oh hi Defraud. Yeah, it doesn't tell you how long you've been affiliate. I could have been affiliate way sooner, but I never went through with like the process onboarding, but I feel like I've been like 2021. Yeah, it's been a minute, Defraud. Yeah, I didn't realize it, but yeah, it's been a minute, hasn't it? Yeah, no, I'm on Discord. I'm not sure. Part of me feels like you don't know my new handle, do you? I always on Discord though. Like I'm always on Discord actually. More than my this. So, yeah, it's just Rainbow Kappa on there, Defraw. I don't know that, why you're curious, but yeah. So Wii modding, Wii music, people, I still do it from time to time. It's not my primary thing. Um, unlike Wii music has always been just a thing, right? People know me on YouTube. I do it from time to time, but I'm not as, I guess, passionate or into it as I used to be. But that's just mainly because of a mixture of burnout, and people literally are asking, like, people think I know more than I actually do. People like, you know, um, they don't spam my DMs, but they ping me over stupid stuff. No offense to those that may be in that community, but I just don't do requests and all that. I do this for fun, and it's Wii music out of all things. It's like, guys, it's just a MIDI file you port into a game. Is that really what you want? I mean, Wii music modding's always been like a niche. It's like it's always been like it's like it's Wii music. It's like it's funny. And it's cool that you can do it. But it's like I think the same thing happened to Pino, or I think it's Pino. I don't that guy, right? But I think he left right after Remajor 2.0, which is like the big update that people wanted for that. So Mega. Sorry, Mega posted an image in the Discord. No, but yeah, so after Pino released Remajor 2.0, he kind of disappeared, and I think he's fine. I think he's just sick of it,
Oh my god!
Oh. You moved to Wario, Mega. Are you happy with yourself? No, but yeah, Remajor 2.0 came out and you left, and, I'm here, and, to be honest, me and a couple of little people, the Wii music rearranged melody, whatever you want to call it, they're all, familiar with that. We're in, like, a private Discord, but usually the group of us don't actually work on, like, it's like a dead Discord. No, it's just a little, like, we want to work on something, but it's not my focus, and at the same time, not everyone's working on the project at the same way, so it's like, it's not really worth it. It's whenever it comes out, or if we make songs, we put them together. But, if you're curious about Wii music, the most active I'm in that community would be in the Discord-wise, would be in the Wii Music Editor Discord, which is the tool that most people would use to make custom songs. But yeah, I'm not active much in that community right now. I play games, I enjoy it. I'm a vivid Wii head, all that. But really, it's like, it's the only reason I'm around because I like me. It's like I grew up with the Wii DS, all that.
Welcome to the stream. Today we're playing Persona 5.
Oh, by the way,
Stream issues.
I got some dots back there.
USB fry. It actually did fry.
But they're not open, so they can't, boys. They're the North Dakota original, Tasting Delicious. I'm not sponsored, but JJDB just liked them that much, I bought them. Ones are really good, though. The cinnamon ones are nice, Really, really nice. There's no telling where this culprit may be, guys. If you get the chance to get the cheeses back, it will be A-OK. This is Pete Cashman writing, aka 2020 Cashman. Or King Capitalist Cashman. So what I'm thinking he did, this is just, this is an internal thing now document. This is the source material I'm talking about. This is if I was my headcanon kind of stuff. Inner Kappa workings. I just think all the cheese nips were in this vault. Who thought it was a good idea to put all the freaking cheese nips in this vault? That's no wonder they're discontinued in the real world. this isn't the dev commentary. This is just free Cashman ramble. No, I guess this is a dev commentary on a game that they didn't make. This is Cashman's bread and butter. Welcome in, Desmond, though. I can turn that up if you want. Hold on. Oh, I'm about Hello. Is that betterish? Betterish. Test. Ah, crap. Here, let me do this. I don't want this, the background of the piece. I don't want this, the background. Maybe I have to turn down the rest of the game. Hello. Wait. Do I have my gain? I have a gain on here, don't I? Crap. Sorry about this, guys. But if you're not used to my stream, though, this is part of the routine. Hello! Didn't know you did. Freddy Fazbear, he's so retro, folks. I'm so sorry. Last night in the beta cord, I still have. Hey Desmond, remember last night when we were playing Jablast in the beta cord? And remember how, the three things that would make a nightmare actually happen? Let's just say I dreamt of all those last night, and I had a bloody cry when I woke up. Like, why did I dream of Bud Curly? Like, yeah, I don't dream much. But when I dream, it's really, really freaking vivid. I don't know why. It's just, yeah, it's not ideal. Not ideal. Here, let me turn down my other. I'm gonna turn down the game because that might be the issue here. It's fine for now, I think, guys. So we can adjust as needed. Welcome to the first level of the game, the beta room, without music. Oh, you love the beta room, guys. It doesn't have music. Welcome to the beta room. Standard dreams controls apply. In order to proceed, you gotta prove yourself in this very jank and loosely implemented moveset. Find more signs for more info.
Jesus. I'm a good Christian boy.
That is a question. I love how you guys think I made this game. No, this is Cash Boom. Yeah, Jabox now. No, if you're talking to me, the guy that made Tribute Beta Party, originally it wasn't CNR related, right? But it's technically is canon if you consider the V5 version to some extent. Obviously Cash Boom can retcon this at any time. I'm just saying, if you're talking to me, I would personally say it is to some extent, but the CNR, canon, and I'm just saying it could happen in CNR's world. I'm not confirming it's in CNR 3 or anything like that, or all that. But I'm just saying it happens. It technically happens at the time frame of the in between the you could say the past and the present campaign, kind of between those things. Because it happens in 2023 if you count the the real things, right? That's when the mod released, at least. The brain blast, yeah. But yeah, no, that's what my point is, though, guys. It's it can happen, but if it's canon, technically two versions of Tribute Beta Party were made under the CNR team thing, but it's technically only V5 because because they weren't working under the team in V3. V3 technically had it though. Had SMB Fan and Cash. I think Dismon didn't work on V3, right? I don't know if Dismon's here to he can say if he did or not. But technically there was 2 versions where people contribute stuff. But P5 was the main one seeing our team was under, because I was in trivia beta party stuff. The like there's like different versions of the mod and stuff. But yeah. Let me I'm gonna turn this up a little bit more. If I hurt people's ears, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make this work. Yeah. Alright, I think we're good. I mean, Disman, you did questions and stuff. I mean, that's still a lot of it. I mean, you did I think that's what I'm saying. You did the version 5, the main CNR, trivia beta party thing, right? The last version. But there's technically there's technically versions for it, and that's kind of where I'm just going, saying, people did it here and there. But to Mega's question, ultimately, right? I'm just saying it could happen because it isn't seen our game or mod or fan game, whatever you call it. Yeah, but I thought you did more questions, Mega. You did more questions, Matt. You did more questions. I'm trying to think what ones, but I probably could get like the spreadsheet out and say, hey, you made these more. You suggested a lot of questions. I think. I thought you did more, or maybe you helped with like coming up with a lot of them. Like you helped like. I thought you did more. Yeah, so that might just be me. Oh my. Guys, that's not how you beat the level, by the way. You're not supposed to just fly up and out for the bets. The strats. The frickin' strats. The clutch monkey, guys. Yeah. Rep Chibi Robo and Little Big Planet and Banjo Kazooie and Scumbo Boy. Oh no, not Yellow! Get out of here, Yellow. We don't care about the Yellow. Yellow game sucks. Super Mario 128, Scumbo, Sonic. Wait, Sonic. Oh, that one didn't age quite well. Chad. That one didn't age quite well. Being no seeing our 2. Yeah, Sonic is not dead. As like a little comment there. Plants vs. Zombies. With that on the bottom. Oh, hey, Banjo. with the elaborate text. An Ape Escape. This is funny. I'm just saying this as like a thing. At least 4 of these characters are actually not dead, despite being dead on this gravestone. 3 of them are in this game. You guys didn't literally this site is just foreshadowing 101 characters that aren't dead. This isn't the gamer graveyard. This is the gamer revival grounds. That's a terrible way. This is the gamer resurrections, guys. Hi, SMB fan. Welcome to the stream. Like literally, there's Ape Escapes in this game. Technically, there's like the monkeys. Banjo's in this game. Sorry to spoil it. Banjo's in CNR, and Sonic is in CNR too. And then Scumbo is literally the next freaking level, guys. Yeah, I'm going with this 2020 game. It's a classic. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm freaking sorry. No, Banjo is an, he's in CNR1, yes. You know, while I'm here, let me ramble. This level is my least favorite level in the entire series. Yeah, this is my, nightmare level for probably for common reasons. That is, it's a puzzle level that takes place in the absolute freaking dark. Though, and these enemies are the least CNR likely enemies in the entire game. Why do these fellows exist, Cash? Literally, they're not CNR characters. This level isn't a platformer. Yeah, I really hate it. I dread it. It's like Metroid Dread, but without the Metroid or the bad, or the good dreadness of Metroid Dread. Honestly, never a big Metroid fan, so, but, you know, there's people who like it. Nah! Ah, no! I don't know how to complete this level. It's like such an unusual, like, way to complete it. Yeah, it's like, it's definitely reminds me of an actually early, like, you know, this game specifically reminds me of an early GameCube game, like a licensed one. No, I'm not saying that's bad. Those games have its charm, like Back of the Barnyard. Alright, I'm comparing this. I'm comparing CNR1 to Back of the freaking Barnyard for the GameCube. No, like it had the charm, and it was great when, you know, when Andrew played it because, you know, it's literally the first fan game he played that actually, and it's actually a full-length game, right? It's like, not just some kind of like, you know, 5-minute, you know, past the minute per stream kind of thing. This was an actual, you know, experience. And it's great. You know, it's fun now, but there's certain levels that, didn't age quite well, Cash. You know, it's like, this is my least favorite game in CNR, and like the entire CNR series. Just because, you know, the Gamer Graveyard part would have been just better by itself. Like, if you expand that. Or maybe you go grave robbing or something. Go in the graves or something. But, you know, and this isn't the issue. This is just a little nitpick I'm going with it. Same SMV fan. But I do like the idea. I don't think Cash even attempted, like intentionally did this. But I was mentioning, at the beginning of the level, in Gamer, like, the graveyard section, there's literally 4 characters. 3 of them are in this game. It's just a foreshadowing game. I don't think Cash intended for one of them to be a foreshadow. It was like unintentional because Sonic's in CNR too, right? He's not in this game. But Sonic is 4 of the characters, Banjo being the only one that's intentionally probably meant to be there, are actually not dead, despite being in the graveyard. Banjo is presumed dead. That's the only intentional one. There's Scumbo, who literally is the next freaking level, and you know, and then Ape Escape can be sad because there's literally monkeys in downtown that are the Ape Escape monkeys, like the hats. You know, it's like, I just love that little touch. I don't know, it's not intentional, of course, but it's kind of funny thinking about it. No! Oh, get away from me! Get away from me, you freaking pricks! No! No! Get away from me! Yeah. I mean, like actual characters in CNR. Like Chibi Robo was there, and a lot of the games actually Andrew has played since. There's, you know, there's like a different era. He was playing just more different games, variety. He really embraced variety game night during the, from 2020 to like 2023, 2022. He really embraced the variety. And then, you know, when he banned Fin games, and kind of, you know, that's the end of an era. We've been through an era of beta 64, which hurts, right? No, but you know, he played all those games. I can probably about to say that. Well, except Super Mario 128. Obviously, he's not gonna play one Mario tech demo that's never been released. No, but no, but like 4 of those characters are actually in the games, in 1 and 2. Alright, most of them are on 1 and 2 both. You know, just Sonic. No. You know, yeah, I'm getting reminded how loose and flimsy these controls are. Bro, get away from me. True. Crap, did I break this? I think I broke this level, guys. I think I did it.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it does shuffle through, you guys. It just, I mean, that just literally is terrible, odds. Yeah, it does shuffle through it. There we go. But yeah, probably a bit of a cooldown for obvious reasons. You can stack them if you're good with it, but I do not want people to be spamming that, even though it will just play after each other. But you know, I don't wanna be I don't wanna be blown up by the videos, literally. Now, how am I supposed to get up there? Oh, there. Andrew, are we streaming from a Mr. Shave? Ooh. Ooh, Mr. Shave, I wonder. I do love the fact that Scumbo has been referenced all the way back here, and you know, there's like 2 characters in here. It's a classic. Shout out to Scumbo, my boys. Guys, I think I just no-clipped. Oh! He cheated the system! No! I didn't mean to do that, guys. How? Frickin' how? You know, I should do that. I really should just try to recreate that and speedrun this living crap out of this. So I did not mean to do it. You love the slide mechanic, guys. You know, imagine this was reanimated. This DNR related explosion. That doesn't make any sense. I know that. I was expecting that. I was expecting that until it happened. Good question, Mega. I don't know, I can't say. Maybe another team member can. I'm not sure. Actually, no, it will be not being seen our threat because of that. You can thank me all you want. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. It's always those dang pesky hitboxes. Guys, what am I doing wrong? For real, what am I doing wrong, chat? Am I just not getting good? Or do I need to get good? I think I got good. Oh, I didn't get good. CNR 1 was the tech demo to CNR 3, guys. Think about that. That's such a bad thing to say. CNR 1 was the source material, like you said, Cash. SMB fan. You didn't see anything, right? No, but no, CNR 1 was really faithful to the source material. But, you know, it was a good game for this time, because there's nothing to compare it to in 2020. It was the only, it wasn't just the only CNR game, it was the only Beta 64 fan game. That's cool. Yeah, the meeting is tonight, Mega, all you guys in here, I'll probably be around before then. So, but, besides that, yeah, Mega, you can show me those videos later. I got reminded though that of the dating sim I was gonna make for Andrew for his birthday. That it was announced just so happened on the same stream CNR 3 was originally revealed. I don't know if you guys remember that stream. I know SMB fan was around for that. But it was the week before, his birthday, right? So it was like the week before the 27th, right? He was streaming, I think, Utopia, I think? But it was the original CNR reveal kind of thing that existed, where it was like the 366 snaps and all that. But this was unrelated, and this was like, so really early on, it was like 2021, right? You know, I don't think I was ever, you know, I wanted to do it, but I don't think I was really gonna put the time in ever either. So it was like, you know, moment. I joined the community in 2021, in May, actually. I remember exactly the stream. I don't know what stream in the series it was, but it was a May 2021. A Wii Sports modding stream was my very first Beta 64 stream. I think, you know, I became a community member, and I can't confirm it, but I believe I have been in the stream before, but this was ancient when I was in the community. This was like, it was like just one random stream I was in there lurking. But this was before I actually was like, you know, dedicated in the community. And I only knew Andrew for like, hey, Zach, I only made beta videos. That's literally what I knew him up beforehand. So one day I was looking through my subscription, and when I found it, I was like, I wonder if there's anyone to watch the stream. And I thought, yeah. This was And that's like a to clarify, I don't actively look for people to watch on Twitch nowadays. The last like time I frequently did that, like more than one person one day thing, was back in my Minecraft days, which was pre, I want to say 2017. I was still very young, right, or young for like a teenager. I wasn't making content entirely, though I was making content. It was, cringe. This was before that, Disman, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I knew Banjo before then, because I actually I've subbed him for way longer. I subbed him, like, since, I want to say, like, 2014, 2015. The Banjo moment, Banjo stream, yeah. But, no. Like I said, I found it from Wii Sports Stream, and this was the most selfish reason ever. I was literally working on my Wii Music mod. That's how I found him. I wanted to look for some Wii-related modding streams. And I got recommended a Beta 64 video on the Wii Sports series, did a digging. Like, is there any, chance of the Wii video? This was before the Wii video came out. And also the, I didn't know, there's the Wii Sports video, which is, ancient. But, I found him. I've been on Twitch for way longer, right? Since, like, on the 5th of August, my account will be, I think 13. Or 12. It's pretty much, yeah. It's almost old enough to be on Twitch itself, But yeah, when I usually watch streams, when I find streams, like, at least since, like, 2017 onwards, 2020 kind of stuff, especially nowadays, I usually only stay or watch new streams that I get like connected to like someone I already watched, like Andrew's. Like obviously I watched Justin's because I didn't find Justin originally from Andrew, but he was a big part of it, right? Like you guys watch him, right? So yeah, I found him. I went to JJ's because he's like a in lore or what I call it. I wonder how long it's gonna take him. But JJ is really cool too for his own right? He's chill. He's inclusive. He's a community streamer. Which I'll be honest, I hate to say it, Andrew, but I like JJ a little bit more than Andrew nowadays. But it's literally because I'm more of a casual, chill-back person myself, I'm hyper and quirky, but I like to say I'm a little bit in between. Like, Andrew's a little too quirky since I first met him, right? But when he first streamed, he was just right in my opinion, and then now I still watch him, but honestly I'm more of a lurker, right? Like, cash that is, opinions and stuff. JJ, though, I'm willing to chat more because he's just, he's a smaller, casual, more cool, laid back, that kind of stuff. Also, that's perfect pretzels. It's just like, I just, woo! Is it just me, or is this harder than usual? Or is it harder for me? Yeah, like the deal is, it's really enjoyable once if you're prepared, or you're not willing to just let your mind go off and go off the place. If you're in the community already, it's perfect, right? But I think it's terrible for new viewers on his end. I don't know if Andrew's aware of that, or but it's not my place to say.
Daycare 2 just followed.
Hey, welcome Daycare, welcome to the stream, name's Rainbow Kappa. Yeah, righty. One more freaking sub, guys, that's 4,000 though, holy frick. Oh, I had an idea for that too, if we somehow make it 1,000 subs, like followers at probably in this stream or next stream, but that's not gonna go well. I gotta promise you guys a lot of things. Yeah, like I said, I like Andrew streams, especially, you know, I love watching his VODs, actually. Like, I love watching, you know, sometimes I still do that, where I just rewatch an old VOD. It's great, even without working on Scene Arthur. Of course, Scene Arthur, exclamation mark, project, to hear more about that. But, honestly, his newer stuff is just too unhinged, in my opinion, to be watching over and over, you know? The VODs are nice, you know, and like I don't mind the VODs. It's just being there in the moment. You know, you want to interact. But JJ, I always have them. You know, funny enough, this might just be a terrible thing you shouldn't be doing, but I always have his stream, JJ's stream, and Cash's stream pinned in my browser. So whenever they go live, I just hear them in the back of my ear. So like whenever Cash goes live, I just hear like the music play on the countdown. It's like, oh, that's Cash stream. I gotta tune in. Goes to his tab, says yo, like the stream or something. But yeah, no, you know, it's like I'm in their community, so you know, and I'm glad to be in their community. But it's just, you know, they're not the same people. Where you know, they're in the same community, yet they're so different. Does that make sense, guys? Chess makes the games, like, you know, runs the CNR team. And then there's JJ who plays, you know, family-friendly, casual community on Minecraft. And then there's Andrew. Oh, and then there's the Kimbo brothers, but, you know, they don't really stream anymore. But those are the Jones Soda of the CNR thing. They just are normal. For that regard. But if you really think about it, honestly, yeah, look. Mega! They're real people! They're not OCs! What the heck, man? I think they're voice actors. You really think Cash would hire people just to voice fictional people? Oh, wait. Oh, wait. What the frick? No, welcome back to SMB International Things. If you really think about it, the CNR team are aka Caspoon, JJ, and like the so Caspoon, JJ, and Andrew are the holy trinity of the community. Are the holy trinity of CNR's audience demographic. There's Cash, who literally are making the games, and then there's JJ, who's like the chill, neutral, you know, positive vibes for the community. And then there's Andrew, who's the chaotic. He's the chaotic good. There's the chaotic good, and then there's the lawful bad, which I would say is Cash. And then I don't know what JJ would be. Would he be just the lawful good, lawful neutral? I don't. Like if you look at the chaos chart, right? Like the chaotic evil, the chaotic good, and all that. He would be lawful, yeah. And then what would Cash be? Now, Cash would be like the middle, right? Like lawful. I think he would be. I don't want to say chaotic evil. I didn't say that. I did not say that. I did not say that, guys. You heard him. Clip it and ship it. Clip it and frickin' ship it. Thank you, Drums. And if you technically count me, I'd probably be, I'd be somewhere. I'm not really chaotic evil, guys. If you count me, because I, you know... True. No. Builder. I can't believe that got me. Like it's not like I'm not focusing on the game, but that got me more than it should. It's shuffled. Yes, SMB fan. It's shuffled. So there's like, I can check after I die. But there's so I think I'm using the same thing as Cash's thing, but I'm not using the same. So I'm not using the same. I think I'm not using the same stream solution he used. I used to use something called Better Points, but the deal was it's very limited, in my opinion, and it's very buggy. The deal is they use WebSockets, which means you have to have some kind of thing, and it's really buggy, pretty much. So I'm using something else which is more limited, but it's free, completely free, open source. The Better Points isn't open source, and it's limited unless you pay monthly. I think that's what Cash uses. I don't know for Hamster, whatever he uses, you know. But I use VLC Player, which I didn't know had OBS support till today. So I set this up. But pretty much it shuffles a playlist of videos. All good, Mega. It pretty much shuffles, and there's the Trivia Beta Party reward rate, which is the same thing. Which I believe there's 6 different versions, which are all the variations that I found videos of in the Discord. There's like all the unique ones. There's remember when we went through the there's the Keith one, there's the Kevin ones, and then there's there's all the versions. And the funny part is I don't know if all of them are actually in the game. There's like 8 of them, right? But I don't know because this was like last minute. Yeah, and those are freaking loud, guys. I don't think those are incredibly loud, but like they're like that beep and stuff. It got me. But in terms of the true ones, I made a couple of them too. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 different ones. There's 5 different versions of the true things, and one of them is my favorite. But I do feel I don't know what the odds are for this, but it seems like they're shuffled. But there's certain ones that I just never pulled. I don't know why. So I guess those are the rare ones if you guys want them. But there's one of them. One of the rare ones are my favorite ones. So yeah. I'm getting a little upset that I can't get this. True. There's the fraud alert one, but I don't have the. I need to make that. I probably should have that, shouldn't I? The ethic of variant. This is the Shadow Falls. Oh, by the way, bad news. I'm actually Banjo. I didn't realize it, but I actually am wearing a gray shirt. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I lied. I'm actually evil. That sounds so wrong. Oh, brother. This guy stinks! This shouldn't be this hard. It is. Yeah. No! Oh, thank God. No! I hate that damn fourth tree. For what? If I can get to this? Yeah. Let me try. Let's do this. I can't. I'm sorry you're not. Sorry you're not on, guys. Honestly, but okay. I got this. Okay. Well, what should the prediction be, guys? Will I get this and get it 5 more attempts? Yeah. Works. Welcome back, Mega. We're about to do a prediction because I haven't been able to figure this out yet. There you go. I don't know how bad the economy is, the channel point economy right now is, but so you know you gotta spend them responsibly, but yeah. I do like how I have the most viewers. Thank you for coming by, guys. I appreciate it. This man, I'm sorry. This got pinged about the about a little image that Desmond posted, the a new icon, which is, you know, it's good, but it got me up good. Okay, Desmond. Okay. 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 I'm restarting just so it counts. You're lucky that this isn't seeing our anti-cheat. And then we'll just, I could just, no, I'm playing. CNR 1, guys. 4. This is literally, I'm blaming all this on Jake. I'm blaming this on CNR 1 Jake. No offense, Cash. But, Jank. Frickin' Jank. Yep. Freaking bong. I really wonder how hard this actually should be. Like I don't know how much Angie struggled with this, but this doesn't feel that. It shouldn't be this hard. It feels like it would have been much easier, but I'm doing something wrong. I'm gonna take that. Like, I literally have to forcefully move my controller so it feels like I'm gonna die because of the thing. Did I do it? Yeah! Epic W. And since I got the glitch... Wait, was this the glitch nips? It was the glitch nips. Yeah, Desmond. Yeah, kind of. Kinda had not enough faith. Okay, let me choose this outcome. Will I get the water slide nips? Yes, I did. Anyways. Good for you, Desmond. Good for you, Mega. Bum 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 ba-dum. This you know, the Senior 3 OSD rocks. But this isn't Senior 3, is it now? Or is it original music? This is actually SMB fans' track for Super Mario Galaxy. Alright, Mega. Do they get like 1 point each? Maybe. I don't know. I know that when there's a lot more points, what happens usually is, you know, the person that bets the most gets the most, right? But I don't know. I just assumed there was always one. Like, you know, equal, because it's like, you know, even. You found a bracer and he conveniently lays shit! Mr. Fib will be happy. You will. You will be happy. You know, you wanna do it on protection, Desmond? I can do that if you want. Oh my gosh, the emo fell. The emo fell. Alright, do you? Tell me when to do it. This what's happening.
Good cheese. Cheese.
This is thumbnail material. He's running to you. He's coming for you. Do, 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 do. I'm gonna screenshot this. I could protect, but there's no other mods. Wait, actually, I can't because I have a limited points, so that'd be kind of rigged, isn't it? I don't think that's how it works, guys. You got 5 minutes. That should be a prediction on its own, to be honest. I'll be back to predict. Guys, it's the song! It's shaving time. I'm shaving up the face and I'm feeling fine. It's shaving time. Gotta love shaving time. Where's that one image? Guys, good. It's a giant cheese nips box! Holy crap! I'll be ashamed if you guys never heard of cheese nips in your life and you're in this stream. Why are you here? I mean, you want cheese nips? I'm meat. Same. You know, that's a cheese nips box. Yeah, yeah. Hold on, I'm looking for an image. Crap, where is it? Where is it? Where is this? Where's the image? Where is it? Where is it? Do 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 do.
Hey, wait a second. You're just gonna ignore that golden sheen?
The golden sheen. Hey, G Wisdo. Okay, is this Scott? I'm just, this is gonna be stupid. Crap. Hi, G Wisdo. Welcome to the stream. Wait a fucking second. Guys. You know, we hit 1,000 freaking followers just now. I don't know how to feel that G Wisdo is the 1,000th freaking follower on my Twitch channel on the affiliate anniversary. So what we were saying, right? Wait, Jasmine, were you trying to say on base? Did you not say on base in chat? Oh, brother, what I do this time? All right, guys. Yeah, I forgot. That is a blog term. On base is a friggin' a blog term. I don't know why I did that. So, I guess, while we're on the screen, I got Dodge pretzels. I'm eating this bag that actually just has been in the back. I've got like I got the purple, I got the yellow, and I got the blue up there. But right now it's the classic. But this is one of the 3 snacks in CNR. This is the one that Justin JJB has. And you know they're the Home Dakota original. They're tasting delicious. I'm not sponsored, but you know that'd be pretty cool if CNR 3 was sponsored by Dots. But they're not. I'm sorry, this is a fan game for a lot of things that we don't actually own the intellectual rights for. But you know, we're passionate, we're dedicated, and SMB fans are great composers who's working on it. So, yeah, but let's continue. As a heads up, for the 1,000 followers, I guess I can convey my little plan. That was actually kind of related to this, but it wasn't, you know, happening today. So, I cannot say when, because, you know, this. But my plan for the 1,000 followers stream, which I mentioned kind of on and off, I didn't expect it to actually happen. But it will be to play all the CNR games in VR. Yeah, it was literally just this, but in VR. I wasn't expecting it to happen. But I will be playing CNR 1 and 1 again in the freaking VR. Dreams VR. You know, the VR headset thing. Oh, God, that's going to be so... But yeah, that's going to be at another stream. It's not going to be anytime soon. But I will be playing CNR 1 and PSVR. However the hell that's going to work. Thanks to the 1,000 followers here. Yeah, oh, wow. Wait. The game wasn't playing. I'm on yeah, this is, I don't know when it's gonna happen, but it's probably gonna be, it's gonna be like this. It's gonna be a little special, you know? But, you guys know how Ring VR works, which I don't think any of us have VR, right? I think the only one that has VR is, sorry, the only one that I know has VR would be, Scott. And I don't even know how, you know, how often. It's like a niche. The Dreams VR is literally just a niche. The PSVR 1 is a niche. But it's better than the PSVR 2. I'm sorry. Oh, you do? That's something I didn't know. That's cool. But if you know how anything about PSVR works, is it tentatively just supported unless you specifically... It works for anything in theater mode, so you see like 2D. But if it doesn't, unless you specifically say it's 3D only, you can actually use it in like the 30, right, 360. Same, Desmond. That's the biggest reason that I didn't get it. Because literally, there's no PS5 games I wouldn't just play on my PC. Or PSVR 1. That's a big soap breaker for me that it didn't support PSVR 1 games. And I'll be honest, I don't care about it being on PC support or whatever you want to call it. Because I have my Quest. My Quest is just better for that. But no, yeah, like, so right here is CNR 1, CNR 2, and I believe Costco all have TV mode, not Pacific, like specifically mentioned, so you can play it with like a 360 camera. It's not true VR, obviously, right, guys? It's not like you can play free. It's like, so it's like, if you guys know Mario Odyssey, having like, you know how like Switch has like VR with like the level thing, you can use VR, but it's not real VR, it's like, you see it from overhead. It's like that, where it's actually, pretty good though, unlike the level. It's pretty much, you get to control the world in 360 view, so you can see the world from looking around it, like a, you know, from like the, you know, like a godlike view. But it's an experience, and it's not actually intolerable. It's just, it's like it's better than the Labo. It's an actual VR headset, but it's not an actual VR like experience, It's but that's gonna be what we're gonna do. It's CNR 1 and CNR 2 probably. If I'm not sure about CNR 2. I can't confirm when or the specifics of this. But the plan is CNR 1 and to some extent CNR 2. I will be playing in VR, or at least attempting to play in VR. So there's like the whole I don't get motion sick necessarily from stream, but it will be a little bit uncomfortable over time, That's the plan though, is 1,000 followers to do that. And then in terms of the prototypes and any kind of version of CNR 3, I cannot confirm CNR 3 will be in this. Like, I'm not promising anything with that. But Costco and Wipeout will be on a C, or will be more likely. If Wipeout and Costco have TV mode, not only, it's like, because I know one of them has you can't do in VR purely, so you would be like a theater, and that's not what this stream would be about. It wouldn't be like you can only see it in a theater. So, we'll take that back. I do know though that I can't confirm it. I can't say it. But CNR 3 has playtest. Maybe I'll stream a playtest in VR. Who knows? I'm just saying that as like a throw it out there. It's it's not impossible to for me to do that. I'm a developer. I can playtest what I want whenever I want, whenever I frickin' want. I work on the game. I got reminded of a really stupid idea I had once for CNR, before the discontinuation. CNR 4, the ride. So it's like like those amusement park rides that are like, you're in the actual like the roller coaster seat, like a ride. It would be that, but in VR. That was such a stupid idea I had. But that was an idea I had once, guys. Before the Dreams migration. CNR 4, the room. It's like the dinner party. It's like the horror party, guys. Remember the horror party? I don't know if Mega knows about that. The horror party, actually I did in VR. And that was a bloody nightmare. Oh boy. When is Nabisco going to sponsor us? The hint here is never, because they're not selling cheese cups anymore. And that's a little depressing. I'm sorry for mentioning that. They're going to the trees. No! Get away from me! No! Alright, Maga. Yeah, you're always feel free to share your ideas here. If you want. That's my chat, it's your chat, That would be. This is a joke. Do not take this seriously unless it's like casual affairs. But Stop and Swap, JRS, The Ride, and VR. That's the VR mode. That's the VR support for CNR 3, guys. You have to unlock a stop and rubber word to use VR. That's a joke. That's obviously a joke response, but it's a response while we're talking. It's your sheep's dad. Bye, guys. Really? Really, Mega? Really? Yeah. I'm never gonna rules. Wait, the copper banjo? Ain't you Mr. Street Evo? They're only a fourth of Mr. Square.
Rainbow Kappa TTV asked me, what's your favorite part of Cheese Nips Rescue? 1 inch. I love the part where all the characters do something completely ridiculous and absurd, like when they almost die in a totally dumb way, which just reminds me of the infamous 40 character death scene concept. It's hilarious how they manage to get into such crazy situations, and the humor is just on another level. Plus the nostalgia is real. What about you? What's your favorite moment?
Okay, so I need to clarify, guys. The AI is back, but he's not actually the same guy. He's another AI intern. And this guy, it's not, don't tell him this, but he's not as quirky as the other one. And I really wish he was more quirky. He's literally the teamiest AI son of an intern you're gonna ever get. Don't tell him, guys, but Cash and I both killed him. Yeah, killed the first one. Don't show him the clip. Show him the studio infiltration clip. So, I made sure it was the same base, same things. I added onto it. But literally, he's taking all this too literally. Like, he literally just repeats what I wrote. Doesn't make any sense. And I don't know if that's just a Tangia thing. That, the Tangia is acting like maybe they got, it's just a global thing for anyone that's using this, or if it's just the fact that it's not gonna work off of. But I just want to give you a heads up that this AI is you know, is as is. I have him back because, you know, it's cool, right? But you take that as you will, you know? Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Well, sorry about that. Gotta look at notification. Yeah, I should have seen this coming. It's not the first time he's talking about it. He's probably still mad about all those embarrassing. Why are you wearing snap pictures for the whatever the console that is? How's Mr. Shave, by the way? You just saw him get thrown off a freaking a box of gigantic cheese nips. And how do you think he is? How do you think Mr. Shave is, guys? How? How do you think he is? He's probably freaking dead, unless you know senior lore, and he's not. But, you know, this is... For the one or two of you guys that have never played the games, or never heard of Cheese Nips or any of these characters, it's... Mega, he is kinetically very petty, guys. You see a battle snapped out of it, it was knocked into the void, the level. Well, the void is a mysterious place. There's highly that Mr. Shoe is still alive. You gotta better rescue those cheese nips rescue boxes. You're fat them out. Yes. Oh, yeah. I don't know if it's actually just... I think it was just literally because it was Andrew in a gray shirt. I think that's literally the biggest the thing there. Like, it's like he was just wearing the same shirt from the Cookie Mama thing. Okay, so fun fact, guys. When I originally was, you know, when I first knew CNR, when I first, you know, watched Andrew play before I played it myself, I didn't understand, like, I understand it was, like, probably something or everything, but I love the idea. I originally thought, how did he survive reaching the void? Isn't the void kind of like, you know, you're not supposed to, there's no way you could survive that landing, you know? And then, but it kind of makes sense once you play it, you know, it's just, it doesn't really make sense. The void is like a mysterious place, you know? But, yeah. I don't know. Be careful, Andrew. A doppelganger. I love that pose. That pose should have got me, but like... Like this, guys. It's literally just like that. It's like he's like menacing, like he's just standing there menacingly. It's like the pose of menacing Andrew. Come on, guys. You can't just crush you a block like that. That's unrealistic, even for green standards. Even for senior standards, they're not just supposed to be of the... That's senior one drink, guys. It's senior one drink. You let senior in one drink. Literally, once you jump, it resets. What kind of madman does that? Oh wait, Cash did that. He's my boss. I don't want to get fired by Cash after all. That sounds so bad. Yeah, brother. You know, it kind of feels weird playing this without ground pounding. Or like any modern skill set. Like, imagine, you know, I get it though. If you had a ground pound, you could play the scoots all the way to the end of the level like that. You know, I just found cheese. I just found a great cheese, guys. If I can actually nail the landing, I think I found a better way to do this. Wait, hey guys, I did it! I don't know if you're meant to do that actually. Like, I assume there's some way you're supposed to do that. Maybe like do like the original got the flash ticket scoots over. Because I know there's an actual version, you know, for the team I did internally, where I recreated this level. Just, you know, not related to anything, just Cash wanted me to do it, you know. Other, you know, not important reasons. So, I assume either you can scoot from there, from the green platform, all the way to the way to the end, or you can do this. It's like, it just seems like there's multiple ways to do this. Of course, I don't know what the original intention was, right? But... Bro. I think I'm losing my brain, guys. Losing it that time of stream. They're watching you guys. Stop watching me. The lurkers in chat. Is this where the lurker came from, Cash? SMB fan? Is this where the lurker from Senior 3 comes from? Oh, brother. Seeing our lure? Oh, we're different lurker. Got it. Got it. About hey G, Mr. If you're still in chat, I'm gonna do this for senior regions and also since you're somehow the 1,000th sub, I'm going to do this. Welcome to the VIP club. Yeah. No, that's fair, SMB fan. You know, I really never understood how this level works. This part, it's like a cool idea, right? But you don't have any idea where you're going. It's at that point, like you don't know where you're going. You really can't see where like anything is. I mean, there's the lights, but like there's no real sense of direction. We'll go in, Miss 001. I don't know if there was any audio for that one, but welcome in. I'm doing alright. How about yourself? We're just playing through a dream that is relevant to this channel. God, thank you. This is a dream that's relevant to a lot of the members here. We are working on a dream cutscene at 3, which is not what I usually stream. I usually stream variety stuff, random things like dreams, mostly though. But this is the original dream that Cashboon, who's in the chat, or Cone Capitalist on Dreams, worked on. He worked on the first 2 alone, and then me, Disman, G Wisdo, SMB fan, a lot of us, the VIPs in the chat essentially, are working on this last game because streams, migration, all that happened, So we're trying to get that, and then we're moving on from the community and stuff, or more or less we're moving on from Dreams itself. Well, we love supporting other Dreams peoples and all that, right? But after this game has been involved way too long. Once we're done with our craft, we'll move on. But seeing our 30 is bigger than 1 and 2 combined by a lot. So, I'm doing this mainly because it's my affiliate anniversary. I've been apparently affiliate for like 3 years, according to, I think, someone in here. It's since like 2021, I know. And then, my actual channel anniversary is on the 5th. So this is kind of like a double thing. I might do something small for that. But, I've been on Twitch for a long time, but I haven't streamed as consistently. Trying to get back into it. But yeah, it's SMB fans comment, yeah. But this is also the stream I got 1,000 followers, which is, insane. I've been like at the 990s for a while, but it's a good time. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm actually quite surprised by the turnout, and I appreciate it. I really do. I really do enjoy the chat, the community here. Dream's great. I know everyone in seeing our community is great. But yeah, I've been having hell with this one level though. I was earlier I got accidentally into like a bonus area without intentionally going through the right thing. So I was in there for like an hour because I didn't know how to. I really struggled at the very easy level. But now I'm in this level, and as you can see, it really messes with you. It's like the lurkers, the eyes, chat, the eye, brother. Where, I kind of wish there was a version of this level that it wasn't just darkness. But I guess it would ruin the whole aesthetic, wouldn't it? You know, does anyone have a map that's level? So I can actually not, like, guess? Whoa, 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 guys, oh my, I just got launched. What I just do? I just like, just jump on the platform. I don't think that's how it works, guys. Cash, bad game design, or it might have been peak game design. I don't know what you were on, but whatever you're on, bud, I want it. I want whatever you were on in 2020. Wait, you were in Cheese Nips. Cheese Nips don't exist anymore. I'm trying to think. Purgatory Panic. I think I've seen it. Might have tried it, but it wasn't recent. I'm going. So the deal is, I assume you're gonna ask if I could play it or such, right? I probably have played it in the past on my own time. Cash is the main guy that streams this, the hub and all that. So as a heads up, but but yeah, no. Purgatory Panic, I probably played. I'll play a lot of dreams off stream. And a lot of the team does. If I have, it hasn't been recent. But I'm willing to make a little list on the side of my computer and all that. And if there's time at the end of the stream, I might try, just a little here and there, a couple of different dreams. If that's what you're curious about, I'm willing. But I would play, I don't remember what Purgatory Panic is. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and share it. I don't mind. Or just chill, Also, MSG. Yes, Disney. It's MSG. Wait, doesn't Dots Pretzels play MSG? I don't think he's had MSG, chat. I'm having MSG, no wonder I'm this quirky. Thank you for reminding me of Simi fan. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the stream, but I had a nightmare with that Jawbox session despite it mentioning that nightmare. A bald Carly was in my dream last night. Yeah. I don't want to elaborate. Yeah, for real. It's, when I told you guys this, whenever I dream, it's very vivid. I don't remember my dreams unless they're specifically very vivid. And yeah, no, I can't get that. Last night was a doozy because... Yeah. And at least Skibbity Carly was in there, I'm sorry for mentioning Skibbity. That's, a very cringe thing to say. But we were talking about that last night, and, turning out loud. Yeah, I'm sorry. I understand if you unfollow, leave for that. That's the only time I'm gonna mention that. But I'm so disappointed in some of you, but not all of you or most of you. It's just you know who you are. Whoever put that dang Skibbity Carly meme. I'm sorry. I respect your culture, but that's not anything I'm tolerating in here, guys. That's not something I will mention in this chat voluntarily. And before someone uses the AI Tangia to make me say that, don't you dare use your channel points on that. Please. I'm begging you, please, don't do that. You got loud, guys. I don't know. Well, yeah, because it's what worked, SMB, and they didn't want to, it's obviously funny. What's funny works, like people just saying that. And then I think it was the same people, though. I don't think it was everyone doing it. I did it once, But I literally said after it, I hated doing this. Because I knew if it worked, it was going to work, you know? I wanted those points. And I couldn't think of anything better. But it was literally because I knew it was probably in a feast with someone that had that prompt, so I literally did it. Oh, and SMB fan, remember when they jinxed the skibbity? That's such a line, I hate to say it. Remember when they jinxed the skibbity? The skibbity prompts got like, it wasn't our fault that we got so many freaking toilet humor jokes prompts in Quiplash. Oh, hi, Kevin. Guys, I think Kevin broke my webcam. Kevin broke my freaking webcam. Hi, Kevin. Bye, Kevin. How's Kevin's doing art tonight? Alright, Mega. Do you.
Break. Break. Good. Break.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm actually lost, guys. I'm seeing our third developer is lost in their own prequel game. And Scener 1. The darkness is too dark. You guys got a map I can use or something? I need like a GPS or something. Guys, I just realized something. The way my chat works, it literally shows the clip in the chat. I forgot. I didn't realize that. Look at when you post a clip in chat, guys, and see what happens. I didn't realize that. I didn't freaking realize that. But whenever you put like a clip in chat, it actually shows it. It shows all the redemptions. And that's actually really cool. So if you guys are curious how I'm doing that, it literally is just a transparent browser source. The background's transparent, so you can literally see all of it. Which also means if you somehow want to use bits, I assume none of you guys care about that or subs. Yeah, it's fine. I don't care. Yeah, use on someone better like Cash, right? But all that will show in this chat and on the VOD response. The only thing that won't is that on-screen celebration thing, which for funnies I made the max. So if you guys really want to spend like $100 on me, you can use it, but don't. Just please, just crying out loud, don't. Night vision. You know, I looked into it because there's apparently a thing at SMP10, and this was part of one of those ideas I wanted to do on the stream. But it seems like this is broken, very unprepared. There's a asset on Dreams called the Twitch Plays Dreams asset, which is somehow a kind of like a bot kind of thing where it's like you use this and then use remote play with like some kind of like computer program bot. Like I talked Cass about it. But it lets you do like a Twitch Play thing where you put, you know, you can pick a bar, like, it's, you know, it's literally you use remote play to do it, you know. You can make games with like signals and stuff. But it seems like this was last updated in like 2020, so it was like it was broken on the PC end, seemingly. But I looked into it because, sorry, but ideally I could probably adapt that to make it like a Twitch like control thing where, you know, you could pick a number, you know, and depending on how many people picked in, I'll land the bot and all that, I could make a bot side thing. It would end up affecting the game, which would have been really cool, right? Because, you know, it's a Chaos Edition, but Twitch controls, you know, and all that. It would be really cool for this. But, it was just, you know, too much at the time. It'd be cool to figure out one day, but I know it's possible because remote play, you know, you could fake controls, you have like a control for this or something. You know, you could press a button literally that you don't use for this game. Gotta call like a combo, right? There's ways to do it. But, yeah. I don't know where I'm going, guys. Do we need another prediction? Really, do we need another prediction, guys? Because I don't know how we're gonna do this. I don't know where I'm supposed to be going.
Break. 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 Good, good. Break. 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 Good, good, good. Break.
Where is Mr. Shade dead? Is he not in the slow? Did you guys remove him without me knowing? Did you guys really see one without Mr. Shade? That would be such a terrible thing Cash would have done. Like he's seen me live. Oh, let me update Senior 1. All of it. The original one. All of this. Now, with the small differences, I literally made the void impossible to win. So literally, I'm just gonna be stuck here for the rest of like eternity. Until I realize I have to literally go in the scene and edit it. This is pain. Very painful, guys, for me to experience, okay? To do this for content, there's only so much content I'm willing to do.
Break. 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 Good. Break. Good, 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 good. Break. Break. Break.
Thank you, Dreams. I love when Dreams actually fakes, like, fake the old vibe. Right, that you're disconnected and reconnects, like, instantly.
Break. 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 Good, 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 good. Break. 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 Good, good.
Bum, 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 bum.
Break. Break. Good, good. Break. Good, 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 good. Break. 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 Good. Break. 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 Good, good, good. Break. 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 Break.
Oh my gosh, I've been playing this game for 2 freaking hours, guys. Almost. Wow. Yeah, this game is a doozy. I think Andrew only. I don't know how much. I don't know how long Andrew took to play this originally. Like the original, like, full playthrough of the this version of Senior 1, right? Like not the beta with the demo or whatever I call it, right? The prototype. No, I'm wondering. He did 2 streams, didn't he? So it's like technically it was like. I don't want to say it's been it was like a 4-hour thing because it was before like the 2-hour standard. Why? Why does it do it like that? Why does this game? So don't jump on the grand platforms. Noted. I don't know if Cash knows that's been there, but okay. This game is bugged. It's Red Dead Rings. This music is gonna drive me freaking insane, guys. screw it. We're gonna change the music. We're gonna change the freaking music. Because I'm losing my dang marbles here. So, that's I have oh, better. I remember that. I remember the old image importer, the ancient days of the ancient original image importer. Though I don't know when I know with the original one, like always, it was way worse, right? I'm just not sure when it was. I didn't know when they actually. I don't know the specific update, but I know they eventually had like a focus on that, like really like the sample rate or something. I think was what it was. This is gonna be the music until we get over this level. And this one too. And this one too. Yeah. Sorry guys, I can't find the original source, so we're using this one. No, that's it's pretty much just a silver gunner rip without the silver gunner being involved. It was like one of those. There was still on Twitter timeline moment. There was this, it was a trend of someone making any song imaginable with the Amazing Digital Circus melody. Yeah. Hi Cash, welcome to the stream where I'm suffering in the terribly janky CNR1 release. But yeah, no, this is part 1, or mainly the gist. I'm replaying CNR1, where the clips existed, and I got 1,000 followers today. I hit my 1,000 followers down, which makes me unreally elated playing the same games. Since I hit 1,000 followers, which has been around, I already had this idea before. I'm playing CNR 1 and 2 in VR eventually. I don't know when, but that's my 1K goal was to play this game and 2 in VR, the PSVR Dreams VR thing. Which is gonna be hell because I got reminded how. So Cash, so this game, I'm just gonna back up. This game is crap. Cash, why? Why you put in TV only? It never had. It wasn't in TV only at one point. So what usually happens is when you don't. I think I told you about this. But when it doesn't play in TV, when you don't put it in TV only, what happens is you can play the scene. In like a 360 camera, there's games like on the Switch or Labo and all that, like Mario Galaxy, where you get like an overhead view. So that's my plan, and I still can figure out a way to do this because I'm editing the scenes. So I can just probably remix the stream or something, and make sure it's not TV only, right? I might do that. My plan is to play Dreams in VR, CNR1 or some CNR related thing in VR for my 1K follower thing. I don't know when. But I plan ahead, and I'll probably do like this, probably make a scene or something for it. But my goal is to play Theater 1 and 2 in VR eventually, because 1K. But the anniversary streams will be today and overall. I'm probably gonna play. I was gonna just replay CNR 1 and 2 at some kind of extent. I don't know how long CNR 2 is gonna take, especially when I realize how terrible I am at replaying 1. I don't know if anyone clipped it. I know people clipped the more recent one. But in Razor Forest, I accidentally no-clipped into the water slide section. I will note that. But yeah, I actually triggered the water slide glitch now, like the actual scene. So that was fun, and I realized how terrible I am at certain levels in this game, like the gamer grid. The last game I always sucked at, and I hate that level. No offense, Cash. It's the worst part of this series. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for bluntly saying that. So, by the way, these two tracks are playing until get the VOD done. But yeah, no, Razor Force, it's, you know, it's seen everyone has its charm, right? But it's bugged, it's flawed and all that. But yeah, no, my plan right now for today, what Kirby game? I don't remember. Wait, is this a joke? Is there some kind of joke here, guys? that I'm not getting? Captain Dex, welcome in. Are you talking about Cheese and Rescue 3, or are you? Because oh, this is the original. It's technically a Kirby fan game. Yeah. This one I'm replaying the first one of these. The plan is, as I said, will be me playing this and the second one on stream today and tomorrow. Because technically, I found out I didn't expect this. That was just a day of. But apparently, the affiliate anniversary, you see like the icon, right? It will last for 48 hours. My plan was regardless to stream today and tomorrow. Tomorrow will be longer than me streaming. But I will be playing 1 and 2. There's some, you know, looseness there where I'm gonna depending on time, I might play the prototypes, and I might. I'm not confirming it because I don't know if we're willing to do that or not. But here I will. You're not down. I will just finish the text. Thanks for letting me know. I'm gonna add a little bit more tracks. But yeah, no, guys, yeah, 1 and 2, the prototypes if there's time, and technically maybe some variant of 3 if the playtest, if that is something that I feel can be justified. I'm not saying that. That'd be the least likely thing I'm gonna do, and that is literally if I have time at the end. Okay, yeah, no, and this isn't my main playlist. It's literally just a playlist I put together, like, at the moment, because the Void, the same track in the Void, it's gonna drive me insane. Yeah, but yeah, that's my plan. It's 1 and 2 normal, not VR. The VR thing's separate, and depending on how many you'll watch and all that time, we might do some other stuff. But let me see what we have here. Let me see. Maybe this. Maybe this. Lady on. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the sub goal. As a clarification, I don't expect anyone to do this because bids and all that. But just to clarify, if we do the sub goal, I wanted to do an extra, extra stream pretty much, an extra kind of segment, right? So I'm doing 2 of these, and that's my plan. It's just 2. But somehow anyone wants to sub, because I have no subs, and I don't care. I don't expect people, to sub to Cash and all that. But if we do, I was gonna do something with dreams, and this really depends on I don't expect it, so I'm just saying this, just not expecting it. I was gonna remake the entirety of the Wipeout prototype on like a stream thing. This would just be for me to learn. I probably wouldn't release it. It would be terrible, but I wanted just to remake the Wipeout levels. But like I said, I don't expect this to happen. And literally, this would just be a reason for me to practice seeing, dream stuff, right? But literally, it would just be me on stream working and remaking the Wipeout prototype for my own, my own experience. but as I said, I don't expect this, and I literally just made this just because it's the affiliate anniversary, and I'm saying if you guys wanted to waste money, burn money on me, go ahead. I appreciate the emotes and all that. Like I said though, I definitely think there's better things to prioritize, like subbing to cash and me working on, you know, CNR3 purely. But I'm just saying, for like a good stream, couple streams, or like a really long stream, I wanted to see what I could do. It's kind of like Cash's idea, but it's just way less, you know, strict, way less, you know, it's like a chill stream. I'm more of a chill guy. I'm the JJ version of Cash's stream. There's JJ and Andrew, and then there's me and Cash. Like, they do similar content loosely. But they're really, one is more chill and one is more quirkier. I guess, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. You know what I mean. You know what I mean, chat. And then I'm the. What about Dismon? Dismon doesn't stream either, does he? Dismon doesn't stream. Wait, where does Dismon go under? That's a big fan. Okay, I'm just going to. Sorry for the little delay, guys. I didn't realize I've been streaming way longer than I usually do. 2 hours of CNR1. Wow, I didn't realize CNR1 could take that long compared to CNR2 and 3. Oh god, CNR3, guys. You don't think I could do this in CNR3 in one sitting, but I know. I don't think I can complete CNR3 in one sitting, or maybe even 2. The 5-minute stream, oh yeah. I should leave it that VOD because, yeah, literally I just used that to raise data. But, there we go. We're playing the prototype OSC because it's not kind of original. Cash, be careful what you say there because, unlike me, I pay for your subs. I pay for, I'm the number one, I'm the donor party guy in this stream. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Crap. How loud is this freaking music again? Here, guys. Let me adjust the gain again. Let me adjust this dang gain. I think that's better. The entire team gets on call and does a dev commentary of CNR3. That would be amazing and terrifying. Put it simply. I mean, Discord is one thing, but I don't think Dismond means that. There we go. That's what I'm saying. It would be pure chaos. Have you seen our meetings? You've seen the team meetings, guys? It works, but barely works. We're a dysfunctional development team. For a fan game that should have been, you know, that's been in development for way too long. It's for the art and the craft, but also our sanity is, yeah, flatlining. That's a beef fan. Oh god. CNR3 speedrunning update, but it's only available internally for CNR dev members. Yeah. By the way, is the music better, guys? Is it quieter for you guys? Everything balanced? I've been trying to adjust it. The gain is probably just really messed up. You know how my setup is. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's kind of the reason I'm here. The music is driving me absolutely insane, so I wanted something other than this music to play. I have it pulled up, yes. I have it pulled up. I just, my Gato mic uses it too. It's like the channel stuff. It's really messed up. Sorry, my, Andrew music! Andrew's apartment from scene 3! And Costco. Yeah, Costco. Costco existed, right? Costco music! Oh, yeah, no, I have it up. I hit up the, so I have a custom dock kit where, so I have custom dock, you know, the OBS custom dock. So I have the trap, the twist shot on one end. It's on the overlay, absolutely. I have the activity, and then the scene sources, audio, and all that, you know, like the main stuff. Oh God! Why would we get banned? Why? Why would we get banned? We're not stealing. We're literally we're making the OC because we're not gonna get the copyrighted Dreams music. It's fine, Mac. I mean, the point is, if they banned us, they would have to ban all the other Wario and Sans memes on streams, and that would be very pointless for them at this point. If they haven't banned 99% of the fan content and copyrighted music on streams as is, I don't think they will. I think they're just gonna shut down the server further, you know? No, it's just that one image from Luigi's Mansion playing. Once Cash gets banned alive on stream, and the only image that will show up when he realizes streams is banned, he got banned from making Scene 3 is hold on, guys. Hold on. Once Cash realizes he got banned from streams on stream, this video will play. No, it will not, Cash. No, because, I mean, actually, hold on. What if you get banned and you give me all your subs that I actually pay for myself? Wait, that actually sucks, because I'm just paying for my own subs. It's like gift subbing. It's like me just gift subbing everyone to my own stream. Why would I do that? Why would I pay myself? That's kind of on base, chat. Don't pay for yourself. Don't pay to win. Don't pay yourself to win. That was the video that will play once Cash gets banned. Yes. Totally, guys. It's the tension music, guys, from I don't know what the explosion got me there. It's just like dun 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 dun. Comedically, I think that's the one version of that actually got shown on stream because it was like the first one in the lineup. Because the only way you can get the other like 7 like house explosions in the mod was to do sequels, and sequels don't exactly work well on stream. Guys, hey, Cash, can you do a poll for me? Or I should probably just do a poll. Or a prediction. I don't know which one would work better for this. But if, maybe I should, do a poll. If I don't...
Viable Sheen just followed.
Welcome, guys. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for the follow, Viable Sheen. You know, there's a specific follower emote, follower alert that would probably been good if the golden machine. It looks like one of you got unfollowed, which is fine. Thanks. Gosh, if I don't do this and it's been 2 hours 15 minutes, so probably like 30 minutes has been for this, 20 minutes is for this level. If I can't do this within the next, I guess, 15 minutes, can we do a poll or a prediction, whatever you think, whatever works better? Easier for you to switch a dream to a different dream for a bit. There's a couple of streams someone submitted, and I'm fine with trying them out, you know? Yeah, this level, because once I'm done with this, I know Cloudy Urban and the rest are easier.
I've come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog is a big old meanie hog, so I'm making a call-out post on my Twitter.com. Shadow the Hedgehog, you've got a big mouth. It's the size of Mount Everest, except way bigger. And guess what? I don't appreciate it.
It took me 15 minutes to do this so far, Cash. I just can't nail this. I don't know where I'm going. I just don't know where I'm freaking going, guys. Where is the snack in this level, Cash? Literally, I don't remember, where Mr. Shave is. Oh, so that was the first time I actually landed that. So, there's been 2 instances, right? And one of them was clipped. But whenever I get on the green platform, I just got shot up into the sky. I got literally launched into, oblivion. So yeah, I'm probably supposed to be up here. Also, the tension's scaring me. Where am I supposed to be going, guys? For real, because I really don't know. This is in the game, is it? I don't know if this was. I know this is a prototype OST, but I know all the songs were in the game, weren't they? In a version of them. Where am I supposed to be going? Crap. Bum, bum, bum. No way he's just over there. No way. I don't know why I never seen that block until now. I never seen Mr. Shave just casually swatting me about for the last half hour. He's just right there. The entire time he's just right there. Oh my gosh. Oh, TNR1 is one of those rare Nintendo games I wish I didn't know about. Test. Can you guys hear me? Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Am I back? Am I back? Am I back? Am I back? We're back. We're so back. We're so back. We're so back. I think my computer hated me for this. Thank you, SMB fan. I really appreciate the clip of death. Dead. I also love the fact that you guys will be. They don't need to see the chat, like the chat and the VOD. They just can see. They can just look up here and they see the embed of the actual clip with my system. Like how it just literally it's just the browser source of the chat. You can just see it up here. Like you just see death as a clip. That's sad. Very sad and hilarious for me. We're so it's so just over, chat. So freaking just over. I'm glad you made it. The wait is quite dangerous. Alright guys, back to normal music. Wait. Is there any way the CNR1 didn't have any way to mute the audio, right? So you would have to mute everything? Or was there a way to do that? No, there's no audio channels yet in CNR1. Oh crap. No, I tried that. It doesn't do it. You get this music. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, in the menu, it still stays there. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can still hear the music here. I mean, I can try it in like a scene, I guess. But yeah, Clarity Airway wasn't actually hard for me to do when I was the flying, needs to be used. I'm gonna mute the music. You guys okay with that? With Persona music over CNR music? Or wait a second. I think there's a delay. There's a delay from the music. Guys, there's no music now. Crap. I just realized there's no gameplay to this either. Hold on, Chad. Hold on. I don't know what's going on with my game. With my thing. Can you guys hear me still and all that? Yeah, but I made sure there wasn't this time, and it still did. I don't know why my thing is like this. Kidding me. Guys, my webcam isn't, my capture card isn't showing it at the moment, so it's, I'm in pain. A lot of crippling pain. Sure, anyway, I can just, I think my computer's a little lagging or something. Are we back? Are we back all? Hey all, Scott here, test. I don't know if that's gonna divide the VOD. But, yeah, my OBS hated that, apparently. So I'm back. So yeah, I don't know that. Well, I don't know what showed up for that. Did the stream get divided, or did the or is it still under like? Did it just screen out for a second? So I kind of want to know for my own sake there if it like divided the VOD. Let me make sure here. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good, guys. Sorry about that, but yeah, I'm here still. Don't worry, I'm not gonna end stream because of that. I'm definitely going longer than usual though. Yeah, as I was wondering about that. Thanks. But yeah, so it looks like with the audio, it looks like there's a delay, but it did cancel the audio cache. So we're good. In terms of, by the way, in terms of how late I'm gonna go for the stream, I have no idea. Originally, I probably would have already ended now if I wasn't already, but it wasn't, my goal wasn't to play CNR1. Well, my plan is I'm gonna keep going until probably at least, until I get at least the main cheese ups done, the fake ending, people might say, of 1. I'm probably gonna get the glitch ones as well, but we'll take that by ear. But at the very least, I'm gonna be probably go for 3 hours, and in the middle maybe take a break, play a couple other dream stuff. Well, we'll figure it out. We got people reviving, right? But yeah, let me do that. All the alerts should be working and stuff. I'll get like a heads up. Yeah, they all should be working still. Let me that's why I gotta check. Because I'm gonna do this too. Crap. I don't know why that's not working now. Oh, brother. Well, we'll figure this out. Let's just play the game for now. Hey, Curb on a plane. Hey, Andrew, don't worry where I got this plane. I brought you a present. It's just a static plane in the sky Curb is just casually sitting on. And he got a jetpack. Woo! That's a surprise! They never saw Curb coming! Like this. It's CNR1 logic cache. That's what you did, I guess. Is there any time limit to this? There's literally any time limit to this one. It's just like, I'm just flying. Like, literally, I could just fly up here then, because literally flying gets the snack. That was easy. Yeah, Meg, unfortunately, this is still CNR1. Yes. The boy took me like a half an hour to do, realizing that it was a fairly easy way to do that. But now it's the Ava speaker. Oh, thank God they haven't got to you. Persona? Persnickety. It's the Persona music, guys. It's the guy from Persona. Guy in Smash. Some apes chose to brainwash the entire population. They're mindless zombies. We need to chase off those apes. Some ape escape. That's correct for you. The apes are being held up in that tower. They look pretty tough. Be careful. I'll give you one of their hats so you don't stand out. Don't worry, it's not real. Oh, and watch out for the traffic. Oh, they died. They died. Just got it. They just killed their own innocent civilians. It's sweet, popular, sexy man. Oh God. Oh, hi Morgana. Look my cool Joker. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about that. I had it in time. You know the game. I had in time. Yeah, this is actually had in time limit. That's almost satisfying. Oh, remember that, guys? Remember when Cash was really gonna play like a Odyssey as a hat mechanic? Unused content. Hold on. Ape Escape is one of those rare Sony games that it's just been seen out for no reason. I don't think Andrew's never played Ape Escape even, has it? Like, it's just literally, it's just here because it's monkey. Just because Donkey Kong is monkey. It works, really. It's because it's just like one of those streams, like, it's just because it's on PlayStation, it's funny. Yeah, man, I was gonna say that. Just... Oh, so, I'm killing all these monkeys. I'm sorry, guys. Peter, don't kill me, but I'm killing these monkeys. Wait a second. Wait a second. Guys, they're not dead. They're just floating. They're chilling in the void. They're just chilling down here. They're chilling. Guys, they're not dead. Look. Like, they're just down here. I don't know why, though, where those are not working. Okay, hey, is there a way I can retry these? Let me see. Yeah, I'm trying to re-queue them for you. I don't think you can re-queue them, so, here guys, how many do I owe you guys? How many? Here we go. I'm just going to make sure. That's why it wasn't working, because it's apparently the source got selected somehow when my OBS crashed. Oh, yippee. Don't do it yet, guys. Don't. I fixed it. So. There. Let me. How many do we owe you? How many do we owe you? 1, 2. You know, I'm just gonna give you like 3. Hi, welcome in, Alexito. Welcome to the stream. Sorry, really loudness, yeah.
Adachi. Adachi! Adachi!
Sorry for that one. And then thirdly, to catch up on the redemptions, guys. Sorry about that. Yeah, the Vine Boom should have been outlawed, but the video apparently has Vine Boom Crunch. So yeah. I love how Banjo is just literally just vibing, circling the Donkey Kong. Like, it's just like, seeing her one moment, guys. Looks like my stream thinks it's too. But yeah, that was a banana word. Okay, guys. But yeah, redemptions should be fixed, I think. But just be sure. That's way too loud. That's way too loud. That's way too loud. Oh god. Oh god. That one got me. Apparently we got viewers though. We got a lot of good viewers. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Playing CNR1. The pretty much here, me and a lot of the pretty much any of the VIPs here are affiliated with this main project I work on. Which, you know, I don't stream as much as spending cash. Sorry, that's a rare one. That's a really rare one, guys. That's like the rarest one, actually. The spooks. But Casper makes the main game, the CNR 3, right? Expansion project, all that. But all of the VIPs here have some kind of affiliation with that. We work on it. This is the original one, though. Hello, welcome in Doa. I have a list of dream games that I don't usually do requests as a heads up. I don't, you know, I do a lot of variety stuff for dreams. But I will probably play these those requests at the end of the stream, just so because we have a lot of people here, and you know, exception, right? But but I don't usually do that, and and this isn't like specifically of your request stream. So, but if you want to start, want to come by, want to check in again, I will. You know, I probably will play that stream and a couple others that people have just dropped by. But appreciate everyone tuning in. All that. This was a mainly CNR related stream. So. Yeah. I don't away from me, you dirty apes. I'm just gonna start that before. He's following me. He doesn't like fly off, he just follows me. Yeah, I'm glad you. Thank you for coming by though. It's like I appreciate everyone coming by. Definitely. The main reason I'm doing this is because it's my. I've been affiliate for about 3 years. I don't really stream as much as I used to. I want to get back into it. But so the fact that people came by and watched, you know, lurking, I appreciate it. But yeah, since we got 1,000 followers, I'll be doing a future Dreams at streams too. I'm gonna try streaming at least a couple times every week, you know, from this time frame, all that. So yeah, appreciate everyone coming by. But yeah, right now I'm mainly working on playing this, and you know, probably do any dreams that people submitted at the end. If I can actually, you know, not get spawn killed. So the flea went made me go with him. Donkey Kong literally is just launching me off. Like he's literally just like tagging onto me and then what kind of is this guy? but that one got me out of it. I just thought Joker was literally just like that was like a bug, like they just posed into them. You're fat, Lamau. Banjo's antics are getting more serious, guys. We need to act fast. I look at it, Cheez-It Outpost. The place that's crawling with Cheez-It Mafia members. Remember Cheez-Its? I mean, those they this. It's a perfect place for Banjo to hide there. I say we pull a Payday reference, Payday 2 reference, Cash, really? Got a Payday 2 reference this? Bro, I can't believe it. Do you know anything about this Scumbo character? Aw, Scumbo, everybody keeps talking about him. Aw. Did we order some deer soup tonight? Hey, it's great. No, you should not order deer soup. I don't even drink deer soup, guys. Brother. Time for the Forgotten Fortress, folks. Oh, that's great lighting, by the way, Cash. I don't know if you know that. I remember how bad this level was in terms of actually figuring out where you're supposed to go. Really, the key's right in there, but you're not actually meant to, you know, it's like really, I think the only way I figured it out myself, and I think Andrew did the same way, was literally you gotta scoots up this, somehow get up, scoots up this, scoots up the actual, like, rocks that you're not meant to actually be able to scoot up of. Like, there's no, like, easy, like, the way you really didn't know. And then there's like the glitch snap, right? It's not very user friendly, knowing that you have to like mash, like it's not meant to be mashable. Here we go again, the launch number 3 of the game. This level, yes. And you know, this level would have been really easy if you could compound. Compounding doesn't exist yet. Oh no, so, some of these levels, I hate to say it, but getting the glitch snap is easier in some of these levels than the actual snack, like the cheese snaps. It's like almost insane how easy, like technically you could scoots up here and it will be easier to get, like the actual, like the cheese snap box. Who made this? Yeah, I wonder who. I wonder what he's up to nowadays, guys. I wonder if there's a command that would sum it up. ! Project. Hey, it's the project command. Who was put a thonk? Wonder who made that game. Cash from the top off. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't put you under fire like that. He is the project guy, yes. Perform your civic duty and press that command. That animation is such a fun. That's like the most animated part of this game, guys. Actually, the opening's more animated, but this is like the most animated in-game scene, I guess you could say. I love this dungeon was such a scene. It's not really a level. It's just literally you just don't touch the enemies and you don't, or else you don't know the scene restarts. Stealth, guys. Seeing everyone's stealth was something. Seeing everyone's stealth, chat. But those two, well, those are not really built for this. Is not a stealth game, guys. It's a platformer. The 3D platformer like CNR3, but it's before CNR3. Or even Senior 2. It's like the bare minimum, like a bare bone of a Jones platform. And no, it's not Quest for Cheese, dummies. This ain't Quest for Cheese. That's cheese, not cheese nips. The wall. I'm not even gonna go with you. Wow. It's a Scrap Mountain. One of the few levels that aren't in Senior ever since like 1. Like this, Gamer Graveyard, and I think, and technically, like a lot of these levels on Senior 1 just don't come back. Scrap Mountain, like they're like a lot of these levels are at least mentioned in 2 and 3, but like Scrap Mountain doesn't even really get mentioned. The Void at least gets somewhat mentioned in like a lore sense, but Gamer Graveyard and Scrap Mountain just don't exist. Like literally they exist, but they don't ever get mentioned after. You know, it's like funny because they're not really connected, I guess, either though. You know, you don't really have any way to go to a Gamer, like there's no in-world location for Gamer Graveyard. I think it's just an outpost. I think that's what it was meant to be. It's like an island outpost maybe. It's like one of those rare things. Like, does it? I didn't even know that. Is that where the graveyard is in the future? Is that what we're gonna use for? I guess that would make sense. Only graveyard sooner. But actually, that would make sense. I think we should do that if we haven't already. No. So I'm gonna add some music because we're adding towards the end of the soundtrack. I assume. By the way, if you guys are curious about the legality of this, it's the prototype, so it's not shouldn't get copyrighted. But so this is on the VOD. No one's gonna hear any music, so it's just gonna be the game. So any music in the game, or yeah, or nothing. So they'll just think I'm insane, which is content apparently. They'll see the text here, they won't see anything. Oh, he is a narrative was not a fan of this game until literally, yeah. I mean, was it? Okay, I don't. So I'm not saying this was part of it, but I'm wondering, was the fact that JJ asked you to add like that alternative ending part of that kind of like process? So I know you said that shared the story of it. I mean, like of having you know, like I'm not gonna beat around the dots pretzels in this game. The curve, you know, that's literally probably part of the narrative. That's literally just part of the narrative here. Desmond, I hate to say it too, but all the ideas have come from jokes. Like a lot of our big ideas just are jokes related. We say, what is in this funny? And then we'll make a serious thing out of it. I'm not saying CNR 3 is a joke game, but you know, a lot of the Bond characters are just we thought it was funny to have, so we did. Well, no, we got this, for sure. We know what we're doing. But it's also going to be really dark. I can already tell. The future's going to be the dark part of the game. More dark than, you know, Banjo and all that. And all that. We really just need CNR 3 into a dark, edgy game. Hey, Judy Neutron's gonna die! No, I'm playing. That's right there, guys. I love how Ape Escape monkeys are literally on this mountain, dude. It's just, I don't know. What? Technically, I know technically, if you get the glitch net, this is literally above the, this is on the same pretty much level as Forgotten Fortress, isn't it? Like, this is literally at, like, Forgotten Fortress is at the base of this mountain. Because the glitch net is on this mountain. It's meant. Jimmy's mom no longer has it on. Oh, no. Adachi. Nah, don't kill him again. No. No, Cash, no. Don't do that. You know who we should kill? Is... Hold on. Let me see. Who should we kill? I'm pulling up the character list, guys. Who should we kill? Do we know anyone named Andrew from Beta 64? Maybe we should kill him in game. Anyways. You know, I actually didn't realize how late in the game Nikki is. I thought Nikki was sooner. This is so broken. That's a thing, Cash. Yes. Don't believe, please. We don't want to kill him now again. Not this time. Don't try to kill him and then have to back it. Really. But Jimmy's mom has got it going on for her. Guys, you should kill him for that. No.
Jesus.
That should have got me. That really should have got me. No, jeez. You know who we should kill is Hugh, because he hasn't been in CNR since, I mean, he's had like in CNR, but he's like, wasn't like his only real appearance. He's like the only really, besides Carl, like the only real Jimmy Neutron character that has been in CNR. Like how they should die. I mean, Hugh's been in the game. Hugh is literally in the game cartography world. That's literally what he is, and that means he wasn't technically in scene. He was, you know, wasn't in the CNR world. It was literally just like a non-canon part of the world, or whatever I want to call it. I don't know. The game cartography world is really weird in my opinion. Like, it's not in CNR. It's like a testing grounds, right? But he was technically in there, making him and Carl like literally the main only ones that have been there before, you know, the future campaign. It's interesting, at least in my opinion. Oh, does not scare me. Gets killed. Anyway. No, don't laser beam me! Don't laser me! You know, literally, I literally didn't do anything. The fight controls are been focused on the music. Somehow I brought them back, and now I have to fight like laser beam Nikki or something like that. How do you beat Vicky again, Mac? Literally, I don't remember. Oh, you literally just... That's a good way to beat him. Wait, guys! I think I found a way to cheat death. Guys, you get 3 health when you're flying, but you only get but like they're separate. They're separate when you fly. Cash, you didn't know this? When you fly, you get 3 health. We'd be really cheating death here, guys. You like cheating. Guys, I think I broke the game. Cash. The icon. Hi, icon. How are we doing today? Wait, did I get the snack though? Did I get the snack already? Because I don't know if I got the snack. Like, I think I broke the game because I technically got the snack, didn't I? Like, I got the snack. How am I supposed to leave if I have the snack? Cash. Alright, I'm not used to that. You know, I'm used to seeing R3 actually having like an actual menu, the anti-cheat spin. Even when the anti-cheat doesn't exist yet. Yeah, we're really getting trolled here, guys. No, let's see that. No way, contrasting peaks from CNR3 and CNR1? Can't believe it! I really wonder I'm a little curious, where Andrew's house is from Mountain Crater in CNR1 or 3. I wonder where this place is in CNR3, that's what I'm saying. Oh, we don't little bit curious. Little bitty. I'm curious, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really. I'm trying to make a joke there. That fumbled more than I think it did. Oh, hi Morgana, welcome to the stream. First time chatter in chat. It's fine, Morgana, welcome in. Glad you made it. We're playing Senior 1 for the affiliate anniversary. Now we're just vibing. I've been here, we're playing, we haven't done anything but Senior 1 this stream. And it's been a long stream. 3 hours, guys. 3 hours stream. Let's freaking go! I don't know, I was trying to make it a Naruto. But, at this rate, my plan, regardless, is gonna get the, to get the cheese up the regular one. But after this, I might take a break, or I might, I don't know what I'm gonna do exactly after this. Cheat, like the main, the fake ending, pretty much. I'm gonna, regardless, I'm gonna carry these to tomorrow, regardless, because I got 2 I'm gonna definitely do tomorrow more, likely now, at the length. But I'm definitely probably gonna try doing those other streams after this, and then probably do the glitch snips at the very least. Part of me wants to kind of stream until JJ goes live, but we'll figure it out, guys. But my plan right now is the motion creator. Making creator hype. No more gonna. Oh no, I'm glad you made it. Oh, so yeah, I got 1,000 followers, which is it's a thing. It's a sight to behold. Oh gosh, dude. I have another controller, fortunately, for this, but that's not the notification I should be doing this while I'm literally failing the platform in this level right now. I really thought that was gonna work. I really thought that scooting through the snack into the lava would do something, guys. I really thought that. Wow. At least I know where the snack is. My homie! My homies! My homies, guys! It's that point in the stream where it's like there's a difference between me streaming for only like 2 hours and less, and then me that's been streaming beyond like 2 hours, 3 hours. Like this is like me, like the like the meme me, quirky me. I'm becoming more calm and chill than quirky than I started the stream with. Which you guys probably like that more than my hyper quirky self. It kind of sucks. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I'm so used to the lava physics in Senior 3 that I really wish you could have damage boost to the lava so you could it wouldn't instantly kill you. Unlike Senior 3 though, you just get insta kill if you drop it, even touch the lava. If you touch it, you're dead. You're dead, Dan.
car. Brake. Brake.
I really wish there's some way you could scoot and land it and you could snap easily with that one, but no.
Brake. Good, good. Brake. 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 Good, good, good.
Oh, this song again.
Brake. Good.
Hi, Lady On. Welcome back to the stream. Hope your day doing okay. Wait, what do you mean by sparing? I'm not into that. I'm not into that, Lady On. I'm sorry. Chat.
Brake. Good, good, good.
Yeah, I banned that person. I banned that sickle in chat. Okay, guys, I'm not into that stuff, especially on stream. It's kind of weird. It's kind of cringe. It's kind of a little skibbity for me. I have to admit, not my style. Not my style, guys. A little unbased, a little block termed in here. I'm a little too banjo pill. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a good bit.
Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. Good. Brake. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Brake. Good. Brake. 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 Good. Brake. Good. Brake. Good. Brake. 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 Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. 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 Good, good, good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. Good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. Brake. Good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. 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 Good. Brake. Good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. Brake. Good. Brake. Good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. 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 Good, good. Brake. Good, good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good, 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 good. Brake. Good. Brake. Brake. Good, good, good. Brake. Good. Brake. 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 Good, good. Brake. 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 good. Break. 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 Good, good. Break. 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 Good. Break. Good. Break. 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 Good, 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 good.
Yeah, I did it. Just took me some luck there. I need the last one wherever this one will be there.
Break. Good, good, good. Break. Good, good. Break. 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 Good. Break. Break. Good, good. Break. Good, good, good. Break. 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 Good, good. Break. Good, 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 good. Break. Break. Good. Break. Break. Good, good, good. Break. 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 Good, good. Break. Good. Break. Break. Good. Break. 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 Good. Break. 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 Good. Break. Break. Good. Good. Break. 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 Good. Good. Good.
This last one's gonna be hard to snow real fast.
Break. Break. Good. Break. 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 Good. Good. Break. 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 Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. 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 Good. Good. Break. 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 Good. Break. 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 Good. 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 Break. 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 Good. 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 Break.
Hey, it's wrong. That was practice.
Break. Good. Break. Good. Break. 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 Good. Good. Break. Good. Good. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. Break. Break. Good. Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. Good.
That might work.
Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. Good. Break. Good. Good. Break. 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 Break.
Oh, that would have worked.
Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. 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 Good. Good. Break. Good. 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 Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. 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 Break. Break. Good. Good. Break. Good. Good. Break. Break. Break.
I don't know what that did.
Break.
Okay.
Break. Break. Good. 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 Good.
So I keep the room for the snack. That means
Break.
snacks.
Break.
Actually collectible. Cool. Actually, get over there now. It's not exactly lava. It's not exactly a good level for a platform with loose, floaty, and primitive controls for a game for 2 games to follow. And then, especially when the level insta kills you, it doesn't actually give you any leeway. That's the only one I can expect. Wait, what? It doesn't just think as you get up there? Oh my gosh. Apparently the craters, I guess. That makes more sense. It affects the sinks. It's stupid, but that's how it works, I guess. It's price, actually, now. Cheese ups, guys. Yeah, cheese ups. Good, you found another nearby box. I'll go back and open the old vault. We need as many as we can. It's gonna be the familiar room, the room that got submerged in lava. Andrew used to live in, you know. He lives in this room's basement, technically, I think. It's kind of like, you know, it's like kind of the same place, isn't it? So technically, there's a basement under here. There's technically a place under this. There's a basement under this familiar room that Andrew would be living in right now. So it's scenery doesn't count because, you know. But technically, we speak about it. Joker, why are you default dancing? Joker, stop default dancing. It's kind of cringe. I respect the Joker, it just isn't my kind of thing. Andrew, it's terrible, it's absolutely awful! Andrew's got that! He's got... me more than what I want to play freaking Andrew has the original, the source of my cheese nut! Is he keep himself because I got cloned? He's got immense power. Andrew also kidnapped our friends! He buckled them and onto the original rocket them for the sun! Yeah, he strapped all of them but curved onto the sun, onto a rocket, aimed directly into the freaking sun. You know he's evil because they strapped him to a rocket that literally is going to be wasted into the sun. He doesn't even care about rockets. He doesn't care about how useful they are. He's just going to launch them into the sun with everyone else. Here. This is Banjo. Banjo, yeah. TNR 1 Banjo, to be specific. The cloning process is imperfect. If the original is strengthened, achievements will never be the same. Foreshadowing real life? It's real life, real foreshadowing. Not to mention our friends. That literally has a question in a second. Stop that freaking rocket! I'm sorry, guys. I shouldn't be swearing in my question stream. It's fine. It's okay. We're getting real. We're so real, guys. We're so seeing our cheese nips real. By the way, the music doesn't actually change here, so you might get double music. Actually, I'm going to do that for now until the moment happens. You know what moment? I'm so launchpad filled right now. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to tell you this, but Banjo's here. He's gonna kill us. And the cheese nips. I can't let him cheese nips more than the people, though. He's coming after nips. Wait. No, I shouldn't be saying that. I hope, Morgana. I hope. Really, I hope that we can. If I can actually walk. If I can actually walk first. Oh yeah, the big gray balls. Remember those? Remember the gray balls that got down came? This was before Wipeout. They're the original big balls. The original big. Is Banjo okay down there? I think Banjo's just not dead, but he's Banjo, are you okay down there, bud? It hurts, Sisman, yes. I think I might have broke the game because Banjo fell, but he didn't die. He was just kind of just doing this like in like the void, not dead, but he was like, yeah. Yo, Banjo, you okay, bud? He didn't put much of a fight. He just kind of, died. Hey, David, come in. Everybody's here. Literally, everybody's been streaming. Probably because I've been streaming longer than most of my Twitch career. I'm like, that's a terrible joke. I appreciate everyone coming by. It's the anniversary, Everybody here, except the people that don't get Smash and Fight, because that's funny. Hey Banjo, you really wanted to do this again? Oh no, it's stupid, but okay. Yeah, I see you in here in Sunshine, kills every once in a while, but yeah, it's fine, I get it. Life happens, yes. That's why I haven't been streaming as consistent as, I wanted to do more. I'm probably going to at least, do more streams. I've been doing at least one every week, I guess, nowadays, which is better. But I do eventually want to do, like, these, these streams. At least have, like, a threshold, But I appreciate, as everyone coming by. I enjoy doing this. It's like for the passion, not, the passion of it, Yeah, for sure. Thanks for coming by, David. Really appreciate it. Oh, not again. Banjo, are you okay in there? Banjo's like this. Banjo! Guys, I think Banjo got stuck in like in the wall again. No, not this music. Anything but this music. Anything. And we could still say that its base might be more. Wait, it might be even more wonky. Thanks, Spice Bot. Really appreciate it. But yeah, if you guys are curious, the Apollo command works. I think we have quotes. I don't know if the quotes are fixed. But, like quotes are set up. But you guys can try that if you want. How long have you been following Cash? You guys can try if you want. I don't really care. Me crying because my friends got nuked. Don't we do that every Monday night when we nuke Dismond? Cash, it's kind of gets old after a while. Crying is for late losers. Losers. I'm sorry. Pardon my disrespect. Thanks, Ryan. Right. Alex. I will, Dismond, alright? Save our friends. This is actually really ominous without any music. This is very ominous. Like, without music. Just there, it's just no music. Oh, so yes, this one. Yeah, that's that one, son. It's real life CNR, guys. The CNR, but in real life. Looking for music here. First is, let me see. Yeah, this music works. It works. Guys, it works. I love how Andrew just dies. That's how Cass programmed it is. He dies when that happens. They can't hear you can't they can't hear you, brick in space, guys. I mean, did he? I really don't know. Why would Banjo have it in the sun? That kind of defeats the purpose of going to the... Like, why would Banjo need to go to the sun? Or did he just try to shoot it into the sky and it just kind of have all the rockets he ever did? I like my headcanon to it. It's any rocket that Banjo's launched, it just somehow it happens to always shoot in the sun. He doesn't even know this. He just launches all his rockets into the sun and one of them were just with this to somehow survive. That's my headcanon. Cash! Shh! I did not do that. That's the intern. The intern did that. I killed that motherfucker earlier though. Remember, Cash? Remember when he killed him? Remember? Yeah, that was the guy that Oh. Oh. That was the dodgy bathrooms. Woo! Oh, that's interesting, David. I'll be honest, I did something like, obviously, there's only so much you can do in like a real practical sense, right? For me, at least, right now. But that's what I did for a while with the walks, where I just made sure not to bring anything that, you know, wouldn't hurt, like dangerous. It's dangerous not bringing your phone or wallet or something, right? But I try not to get, like, bring a lot with. Dismond, yes. Yeah, Dismond is onto something. Let him cook. Let him cook on the sun. Wait, he cooked the sun, what? CNR2 was a dream. CNR2 was Super Mario Brothers 2. You were saying it was all a freaking dream. It was not canon or real. Get a real idiot. This is a fake rumor sponsored by the Kappa gang. the pure experiment. It's all pure platforming. It's so pure. It's not a boss. It's just a platformer. Which it works. This works for Senior 1. This was so like anything else in Senior 1 has the charm of being really jank, and they literally don't. Literally, they're just watching you get killed. They were strapped to the frickin' sun, and they were freaking strapped to the rocket to the sun, and all they do is just watch you. They don't help. They don't help. What frickin' jerks! What a frickin' jerk! Looking jerking. No, look like I was gonna make a really bad. I was gonna try to make a joke there. Looking rude, Joker. Looking rude. They're rude. I don't know. Doesn't help. Yeah, that joke. I didn't mean to say that, by the way, guys. It just kind of went out of my mouth and went from one ear to the other. Good. I was trying to make a joke about how they aren't doing anything to help you in this boss, even though they were just strapped to the sun, to the rocket to the sun, and you're trying to save them. But then I said something bad, and then I said something that I should have said, because I went out in one ear and went to the other. I think this boss broke because I think I already went here. Wait a second. How am I supposed to? Guys, how am I supposed to get to that button? How am I supposed to get to that button if it's in the loft over there? Excuse me, Cash. Excuse me, Game Design 101. That's illegal. I don't know. Teleport. Get good, guys. It's a feature, not a bug. Hey yo, Andrew, hey yo. Calm yourself. You shouldn't be doing that to the rocket. No. Not you. Okay, guys. Whatever we say, I give you credit because it's from 2020, a year after, literally with the same year Dreams came out, like released late, right? And I was like, you were still a novice. I give you that much. Well, if you need proof, I got CNR2 to back that up, I guess. How am I supposed to get up here? Like, what am I supposed to do? You can't exactly expect me to just... How am I supposed to get over there? Cash, there's supposed to be 3 buttons and neither of them work. Wait, what? I think I forgot this part of the game existed. I forgot there was... Yeah, I didn't realize you're supposed to talk to them or just being like the radius of them. I guess I haven't played this game in a while. Thank God. I think I'm just... My brain is unbraining for a moment. My brain is unbraining, Chad. It's very unbraining. That made no sense. Donkey Kong, why are you up here, bud? Why are you guys up there? Hold it, Morgana. There's literally no button in that right one, by the way, but it'll work. Yeah, that's funny. There's no... Wait, the button's down there! The button's in the lava! The button's like hidden there. Okay, that's messed up, Cash. Bruh. 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 Let's, give it here. Andrew exists. Oh wait, no. Okay, Andrew. Okay. I got the ultimate smack. Voice crack. Oh god. And we won, guys. We won. Oh, we technically won. It's the end. But you guys know there's an actual real ending to this game that isn't that ending. But you gotta figure that out. By the way, a fun fact, I haven't actually been using my main account the entire time. I've been using it all. Yeah. We will be returning to this. Scener 1. Probably next stream. We'll be doing the glitch steps and probably Scener 2 tomorrow. Because that was enough rage for me in one day. So I will be streaming for a little bit longer, but in terms of what, I will probably be first doing those. I will be doing those few dreams that I got highlighted. Just it won't be long. It will just be me just vibing, and then we'll probably figure out someone
to give GrabCam Pivot a whirl.
And then we'll probably figure out someone to raid. But you know, we'll figure that out. Show times. I love how all the hours in account. It was all for them.
You. This is your aura. Your creativity grows and evolves. Your aura will change to reflect your activity.
Okay, game. Stop being like that. Doxed. Love being doxed, chat. Alright. Let's see, what are my advancements, guys? No, not my advance. The highlights. That's not masking. The giant crunch. Oh yeah, the giant crunch, guys. Yeah, the crunch. The crunch! Alright. So the first one I see on here is, well, that's one of them. I think if you're here still, for those few people that wanted to do that had some dreams in mind, please let me know and I'll play it. But the only one I see right now I remember is the sanitarian one, or whatever that one's called. If anyone else remembers the other dream, there's one other one I know someone asked about, but I'll play that one and then we'll figure that out. I'm just looking for the name right now. And there we go. By the way, because you're curious why my dream is closed because there's some wanted to make sure no one saw anything it shouldn't be seen. Yeah, there we go. It's a horror game. There's a lot of horror games in dreams, to be honest. I am not big into horror, but I will try and giving you a little fair play. But horror is not my cup of tea in dreams. No offense, 10-minute horror is not even that. The issue is just that I just don't care about horror in general enough, because I don't want to be jumped intentionally, intentionally or whatever. We'll give it a couple minutes. When it's 10-minute wait VR, guys, never gets catched in VR. Sad. No, this is not 10-minute wait, guys. This looks like this is 10-minute wait if Cash got their shit together. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Cash. I shouldn't have said that. Morgana. Ouch. That hurt. That would hurt. I'm sorry, Cash. 10-minute wait was good. This is bad. This is bad, okay? And no offense to whoever submitted this, but this isn't my kind of thing. And I was saying that in a sarcastic sense. This, Cash, 10-minute wait's better than this, okay? I'm sorry. This freaking lovely dream. I don't want to get banned either. So. This is a good dream. I like what they did with the modeling, but I don't really understand it. It's not my kind of thing. I'm just hoping I don't get jump scared in the few minutes I can. I'm sorry, Cash. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to be like that, okay? I don't get fired. Don't fire me. Please. Please don't fire me this time. Thanks. I won't get fired again. Not since the whole wipe up incident, me and Ditchman doing that little wipe up incident again. I don't want to. Anyways, I'm gonna add that to my play later, I guess. But just to prove, just trying to make myself not on the FBI hit list or the DNR equivalent. I will. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? We're playing 10-minute wait, just to prove my point. Yeah, we're playing frickin' 10-minute wait. Deal with it. Arr. I know I'm saying like that. I remember when Andrew stayed up all night, showing me and played this, not to figure out he died right before actually completing it. He thought he actually won it, and then he realized he died literally the minute before, like, he won. Which is hilarious for context. I wonder what that phone is. I wonder who it is. Guys, should I answer it? Honey, I'm home.
Hey, I just finished the shopping.
Cash!
I'll be home in 10 minutes,
Hi,
okay?
Cash!
Oh, and I don't have my keys, so you have to let me in.
No, I'm not letting you in. It's my house now, fricker. Yeah, you forgot one of the mechanics, yes. I do like how this is danger in like a sense. Like, you could literally probably just, in theory... I can't believe it. Andrew in this world... Andrew and Cash are roomies in this game. This isn't actually Andrew. That's Cash has to run that, but it's funny because it's convenient. Now, guys, how many of you guys actually played this game or know about it at least? I assume everyone, but ignore that. Who do you think the enemy? Who do you think the monster or the thing we're hiding from? Who do you think we are hiding from in this game, guys? Who do you think this monster is? Tell me. Who do you think it is? Comment below. Mega, nice. Cash, any ideas? I'm saying jokingly, like he doesn't, like he's not the one that made it or something. Yeah, it's you know who I think this is? It's Bug from Bug Fables, I guess. Buggy, you know, Liam or something. I don't know. I don't know. You know what they say? All toasters make toast. Last night was a doozy, guys. Oh, so you know, it's that time of night when the window comes in my face and blinds me. My face! Find a good book. I'm gonna fly for you. Who's in my mind, guys? Find a good book. It has to be good. It can't be a bad book. It's a Mothman. Okay. Use your time wisely, guys. Use it wisely. Wisely. Fahrenheit. Imagine you could freeze to death in 10 minutes, you guys. Imagine. Just imagine for a moment. You could freeze to death.
Hey, I just finished the shopping. I don't have my keys, so you have to let me in. See you soon.
Mega. I mean, you could probably say it is the monster and the clock, but I don't think that's exactly. I don't think that's exactly the monster walking. Alright. 1 second. Guys, I'm gonna have to be right back. Alright. I keep the game on though for you.
cheese.
Cheese burger. I got my dinner, folks. So that's something. Fancy dinner. Hold on, let me just do this real quick. There we go. So yeah, let me see. I want to double check something. I am going to do a couple of things real quick. I think I'm gonna wrap up soon. Just so because I want to do a couple of things, like eat dinner and stuff. Not sure when JJ's gonna go live. Probably just go into him whenever he's live. I'm gonna raid someone now. So let's see if there's anyone in Dreams that we can raid, and we'll go from there. I don't think there's anyone in Dreams though. Or there's anyone in Dreams that looks like they're mic. So let's see. Looks like Wick is streaming. Wick doesn't have a mic, but we know them. They're apparently playing Dragon Quest. You know, come on to support them. If you don't, you can lurk. You can do whatever you want. Appreciate one coming by. I'm streaming tomorrow. Longer, bigger, bolder. Appreciate one being here. So just say whatever you want, and I'll be in there for a while. Have a good one. Cap is out. True. Wait, that's interesting. Until next time. Oh wait, that's JJ's thing. Kappa's out. Peace.